Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English story. I remember the first time I realized I was running on fumes. Not the kind where you're just tired from a long day or a bad night's sleep. No, this was deeper. It was the kind of exhaustion that settles in your bones. The kind that makes you feel like you're dragging a weight you can't see but can't ignore. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a screen filled with deadlines, to-do lists, and unanswered emails. My heart was racing, but not because I was excited or motivated. It was because I was terrified of failing, of not being enough, of falling behind in a world that never seems to stop moving. I've been running on toxic motivation for years. You know the kind I'm talking about, right? That voice in your head that says, if you don't do this, you're worthless. Or, if you don't keep up, you'll never succeed. It's the kind of motivation that feels like a whip cracking against your back, pushing you forward not because you want to move, but because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. For a long time, I thought that was normal. I thought that's what it took to succeed, to constantly push, to never stop, to always be striving for more. But that day, sitting at my desk, I hit a wall. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight, and I couldn't breathe. I remember thinking, is this it? Is this what my life is going to be? Just one endless race where I'm always behind? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change. The funny thing about hitting rock bottom is that it forces you to look up. When you're lying there, bruised and broken, you start to notice things you never saw before. For me, it was the realization that I didn't actually know what I was running toward. Sure, I had goals, get the promotion, buy the house, check off the boxes, but they didn't feel like mine. They felt like things I was supposed to want, things I thought would make me feel successful or worthy. But deep down, I didn't even know what those words meant to me. I started asking myself questions I'd been too afraid to ask before. What do I really want? What makes me feel alive? What would it feel like to live a life that's truly mine? Not one I borrowed from someone else's expectations. At first, the answers didn't come easily. I'd spent so long silencing my own voice that it felt like trying to hear a whisper in a thunderstorm. But slowly, I began to listen. One of the first things I noticed was how much of my life was driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. It was like I was living in a constant state of what if? What if I mess up? What if they don't like me? What if I'm not as good as everyone else? Those fears had become my compass, guiding every decision, every action, every thought. And the more I let them lead, the more lost I felt. I realized I needed a new compass, one that wasn't rooted in fear, but in something deeper, something truer. For me, that something was curiosity. I started asking myself, what would it feel like to make choices from a place of curiosity instead of fear? What would it look like to explore instead of perform? It wasn't an easy shift. Old habits die hard. And fear had been my default for so long that it felt like trying to rewrite my own DNA. But I kept at it, one small step at a time. There was a moment, about 6 months into this journey, that I'll never forget. I was standing in front of a room full of people, about to give a presentation. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty, And that familiar voice in my head was screaming, what if you mess up? What if they think you're stupid? What if you're not good enough? But instead of letting that voice take over, I paused. I took a deep breath and asked myself, what if I approach this with curiosity instead of fear? What if I focused on what I could learn instead of what I could prove? That simple shift changed everything. Instead of seeing the presentation as a test I had to pass, I saw it as an opportunity to connect, to share, to learn. And you know what? It went better than I could have imagined. Not because I was perfect, I stumbled over my words, forgot a few points, and had to improvise, but because I was present. I was there, fully there, in a way I hadn't been in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. That moment was a turning point for me. It showed me that the way I think, the stories I tell myself, the beliefs I hold, can either trap me or set me free. Toxic motivation had kept me in a cage of my own making, but genuine inspiration, the kind that comes from curiosity, from passion, from a deep sense of purpose, could set me free. I started to notice other shifts too. I began to see failure not as a reflection of my worth, but as a stepping stone, a chance to learn and grow. I started to prioritize connection over perfection, realizing that the people who truly matter don't care about how polished I am. They care about who I am. And perhaps most importantly, I started to give myself permission to rest, to slow down, to just be. I realized that life isn't a race, and success isn't a finish line. It's a journey. And the only way to truly enjoy it is to walk it at my own pace. Of course, it hasn't been a straight path. There are still days when the old fears creep in, when the weight of expectations feels too heavy, when I find myself slipping back into old patterns. But now, I have tools to help me find my way back. I remind myself to breathe, to ask, what would curiosity do? And to focus on what truly matters to me. And slowly, but surely, I'm learning to live a life that feels like mine. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that change is possible. Not overnight, not without effort, but one thought, one choice, one moment at a time. It starts with noticing the stories you're telling yourself, the ones that keep you stuck, the ones that make you feel small, and daring to rewrite them. It's about shifting from a mindset of fear to one of curiosity, from toxic motivation to genuine inspiration. And it's about remembering that you're not alone. We're all figuring this out as we go, stumbling and learning and growing together. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're running on fumes, if you're wondering if there's another way, there is. It starts with a single thought, a single choice, a single moment, and it continues one step at a time until one day you look up and realize you're no longer running. You're living, and it's beautiful. This story is for you. Friend, for anyone who's ever felt stuck, Who's ever wondered if there's more to life than the race they're running? There is. And it starts with you. One thought, one choice, one moment at a time. You got this. And I'm right here with you. There's a quote I stumbled upon during one of those late night scrolling sessions when I was too tired to sleep, but too restless to stay awake. It said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step." At the time, I remember scoffing at it. Easy for you to say. I thought, you're not the one standing at the bottom of a mountain you don't even want to climb. But as I kept turning those words over in my mind, something shifted. Maybe I didn't need to have it all figured out. Maybe I just needed to take one step. Just one. So I did. I started small. Instead of trying to overhaul my entire life overnight, I focused on tiny, manageable changes. I began journaling for 5 minutes every morning, not because I thought it would change my life, but because it gave me a moment to breathe before the chaos of the day began. I started saying no to things that drained me and yes to things that lit me up, even if they seemed silly or insignificant. I began to notice the little things, the way sunlight streamed through my window in the morning, the sound of rain tapping against the roof, the warmth of a cup of tea in my hands. Slowly, those little things started to add up. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that growth isn't linear. There were days when I felt like I was soaring, like I'd finally cracked the code to living a life that felt authentic and meaningful. And then there were days when I felt like I was back at square one, drowning in self doubt and fear. On those days, it was easy to feel like I'd failed, like all my progress had been for nothing. But over time, I began to see those setbacks for what they really were, not failures, but part of the process. They were reminders that growth isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. I remember one particularly rough day when everything seemed to go wrong. I'd bombed a presentation at work, gotten into an argument with a friend, and come home to a sink full of dirty dishes. As I sat on the floor of my kitchen, feeling like the world's biggest failure, I had a moment of clarity. This is what it means to be human. I thought, it's messy and imperfect and sometimes downright hard, but it's also beautiful. That night, I didn't try to fix everything. I didn't try to be perfect. I just let myself feel what I was feeling. And then I got up and washed the dishes. And somehow, that felt like enough. As I continued on this journey, I began to notice something surprising. The more I focused on being kind to myself, the kinder I became to others. It was like the compassion I was learning to extend to myself spilled over into the way I treated the people around me. I started listening more and judging less. I began to see the struggles and fears behind other people's actions, and it made me more patient, more understanding. I realized that we're all just doing the best we can with what we have. And sometimes that's enough. There's a moment I'll never forget, a moment that felt like the universe was giving me a sign that I was on the right path. I was at a coffee shop, waiting in line, when the woman in front of me turned around and smiled. "I love your energy," she said. "You seem so at peace." I was stunned. Me? At peace? The girl who used to have panic attacks over unanswered emails? But as I thought about it, I realized she was right. I wasn't perfect, and I wasn't fixed, but I was learning to be okay with that. And somehow, that was enough. The moral: The power of one thought. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this: the way you think shapes the way you live. Your thoughts are the seeds from which your actions grow, and your actions are the building blocks of your life. If you plant seeds of fear, doubt, and self criticism, you'll grow a life that feels heavy and suffocating. But if you plant seeds of curiosity, compassion, and courage, you'll grow a life that feels light and alive. Changing the way you think isn't easy. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of patience. But it's worth it, because when you change the way you think, you change the way you feel. And when you change the way you feel, you change the way you live. It's not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about taking one step, one thought, one moment at a time. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're running on fumes, if you're wondering if there's more to life than the race you're running, there is. It starts with a single thought, a single choice, a single moment, and it continues one step at a time until one day you look up and realize you're no longer running. You're living, and it's beautiful. This story is for you, friend. For anyone who's ever felt stuck, who's ever wondered if there's more to life than the race they're running. There is. And it starts with you. One thought, one choice, one moment at a time. You got this. And I'm right here with you. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care and see you next time.